This is Inside the FLX from FingerLakes1.com. I'm Ted Baker, and we're pleased to have us within the studio today Vanessa Fajans-Turner, Democratic candidate for Congress in the 22nd District, or some semblance of the 22nd District. Vanessa, good morning.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks.
So this election's a little different. Normally I'd start off with the why are you running question, but today we talk about the maps being redrawn, not knowing what the district's going to look like. Not only that, but your whole fundraising effort was geared around a June 28th primary. Now that's moved to August. So what's the plan now as we await this special master drawing new maps?
Politics is about responding to whatever is keeping you on your toes, and we are in this to bring change to this entire area. The lines that we're most focused on now, today, and moving forward are the lines the Supreme Court has drawn in the sand around women and our civil liberties. Yeah,
and we'll get to those in a moment. But so if the 22nd District, you're from Ithaca, they draw a new 22nd, Ithaca's not in it. Do you jump districts? You don't know who opponents. I mean, not only the districts might change, but the people in the races might change. Has this ever happened anywhere?
In my knowledge, it's unprecedented. But I live in Ithaca, I am based in Ithaca, and I will be proud to run and represent the area around the area I know and come from. And I am very proud to represent issues that I do know, having spoken with people here in and around the Finger Lakes, that the issues we're talking about with our campaign are relevant well beyond the borders that have been drawn or that will be drawn. Our issues like women's right to choose, our civil liberties, our right to vote, climate change, agricultural productivity, educational access and quality. These issues are not specific to one county over another. The ways that we fund them may change, but any representative for all of these areas speaks to issues that we all care about. And I think this is an opportunity for all of the candidates in this race to say, these boundaries are arbitrary, and the issues we care about have much more in common than they do that divide us. And let's now get to talk about the issues.
I could ask you the why are you running question, but really it's the culmination of everything you've done in your entire life. You were aware of economic and social and gender justice all the way back in high school.
I was, and I like to talk and always give a shout out to the girl hockey players everywhere throughout this district. In high school, I was a hockey player in a club team, and we had to pay for our gear in our ice time, and many of the girls that I was proud and loved to play with could not afford to continue playing, so we started our own girls high school ice hockey team that received funding like the boys team, and that required a bit of a political push and effort, and the community was wonderful, rallied around us, and then we were proud to start the second team in Geneva. Those were the first girls ice hockey teams in New York State. It was a big moment.
It's interesting because I saw your campaign video. I told you this before we went on, before I read your background, and you skate into view in hockey skates, and I went, wow, this girl's got some skating moves.
I won't show you the outtakes, but it was a very wonderful day. The opportunity to skate on an outdoor pond is one of the memories I hold dearest from growing up. And one might say one of the major personal issues, we have to fight climate change. We need to keep those frozen ponds good for skating in this Finger Lakes area.
If you're going to be an activist, one of the first things you have to be able to do is handle pushback. What kind of pushback did you get when you went around trying to start a hockey team and people said, girls don't play hockey?
There was pushback on all fronts. There was girls don't play hockey. There were all sorts of battles over playing at 4 a.m. versus 4 p.m. A lot of debates can be presented as zero sum. If somebody wants equality, somebody else will lose their advantage or their access. It taught me and our entire community that you can have two equal teams and that makes the community better and nobody has to give anything up. I really believe that that's the kind of viewpoint and vantage I bring to politics. It's also one of the reasons I sit here today as a woman, appealing to our country and recommitting myself to fighting for equal rights for women. I know this is a topic that connects with men and families everywhere as well. But we have to remember that women, whether they're playing hockey or thinking about the families they need to contribute to and provide for, we need to have equal opportunity and choice in making those decisions.
As a progressive, I'm sure you'd say we have a long way to go, but when you look back, what do you think of how far we've come as a society in your lifetime and in mine?
Today, women woke up, and the daughters and young women woke up with fewer rights than they did when my mom grew up. That is a very sobering thought. Women's rights are under attack. Voting rights are under attack in ways we have not seen since the initial Voting Rights Act was passed. And we cannot go backwards. I am a progressive, but I'm a pragmatic progressive. We know what we have to do to advance women's rights, to secure by codifying Roe versus Wade at the national level. We know what we have to do to secure voting rights for everybody across this country with equal opportunity and access to the ballot. And we know what we have to do to fight climate change. I'm in this race because the things we have to do aren't getting done. And it's time to stop talking about them and actually get a little scrappy in the corners like we do on the ice.
I know I want to get into some of these issues in more detail. First, let's bring people up to date a little bit more on your background. You worked at the United Nations. You teamed up with director James Cameron to do some documentary work. So tell us about your life of activism leading up to your decision to run for Congress.
I left college at Harvard and Johns Hopkins and went to the United Nations Development Program, where work wasn't as about activism as much as policy leadership and diplomacy. We worked internationally on negotiations that affected public finance and national policy to reduce poverty. I was based in Nigeria for some time, as well as the headquarters in New York. I then met James Cameron because he was interested in environmental work and indigenous rights that my family has been involved with through their research for my whole life. He started a foundation that I took over and helped create that focused entirely on environmental conservation, indigenous and human rights, and climate change policy. That was an endeavor of 6 to 7 years. We did make several documentaries during that time, but he was a person committed to advancing climate justice, which means climate change with human rights and provisions for frontline communities. That's the kind of lens and approach we need to bring to all of our policies.
What perspective did that international work give you? I mean, here in America, we're a continental nation. We're, I think, sometimes in a certain manner more isolated than some other countries that are used to working with each other. What did that international work give you?
It's a wonderful question, and thank you for asking. We don't get to talk about international relations as much as perhaps is relevant for everything we are going through. As an employee of the United Nations and as a current member of the Council on Foreign Relations, I integrate foreign policy and foreign policy research into everything that I'm talking about. Today, the world is reeling from the humanitarian crisis and war in Ukraine, and the ways in which misery is affecting all of our hearts, as well as the ways that our markets and access to energy have been roiled. These are things that we have to understand come from long-standing policies, and particularly our energy dependency on places like Russia. Our foreign policy needs to be our climate policy, which needs to be aligned with our national security and international security policy. The more we separate these conversations, the more insecure we become. If elected, I would promise to be focused on maintaining U.S. renewable, sustainable energy independence, and also focus on the issues that make the U.S. a symbol for the rest of the world in terms of democracy, strengthen our rights.
You have an interesting take on fossil fuels. You've said that we should be putting pressure on the fossil fuel companies, but more so on the banks and the financial institutions that back those companies. Explain that.
We have talked a lot about the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which is a powerful bill that will make a historic transfer of $1 trillion over 10 years from the federal government to our local governments. If you think in contrast to what banks have invested in fossil fuel infrastructure alone, it's $4.6 trillion since the Paris Agreement was signed over 6.5, 7 years ago. 4.6 trillion over 7 years versus 1 trillion over 10 years. If we think about that money alone, we recognize how unequal our spending has been. That's why I focus on banks, because banks are the ones facilitating and choosing where we put our priorities as a nation. They are not aligned with the security interests of our nation. They have been heavily exposed to Russian energy and many other types of energy that undermine the types of policies our government is trying to pass. My work has been about ensuring that banks do the right thing voluntarily and opt in to reallocating that finance to the priorities we need to pursue for climate and economic security. They aren't. And I'm running for Congress because we need to regulate them and ensure that they are not undermining all of our interests as bank clients and as citizens. And if they won't do it themselves, our government has a responsibility to help them.
Why is the political right so dismissive of renewable energy? I mean, every time there's a cloudy day, look at your stupid solar panels, it's cloudy today. Car batteries won't work, they can only go 200 miles. I mean, fossil fuels are finite and they're going to run out at some point. It would seem like even the fossil fuel companies would have an interest in developing what's next.
I believe in science, and I hope everybody will consider their vote as a vote for science. The right has become dismissive of science, and they have become beholden to special interests. Fossil fuels spend billions, hundreds of millions and billions of dollars over multiple cycles to ensure that their interests are represented in our U.S. government at all levels, including here in our own backyards. It is essential that we send people to Congress who are thinking about putting people over profits. People over profits. I believe the Republican Party has lost that guidance. And I know, as a Democrat, I stand up for doing exactly what it is that puts our community's interests and our climate's interests and our working families' interests first.
Let's talk about reproductive rights. It would seem almost certain that Roe versus Wade is going to be overturned, which then puts the focus on the states. Is there any hope at the federal level, or do individual states like New York have to get to work codifying what's allowed in the event that it's overturned? I mean, it seems unlikely that Democrats will gain control of the Supreme Court maybe in our lifetimes.
Let's talk about this and break it down. At the federal level, there is still a pathway to protecting our right and access to safe and legal abortions. We need to codify Roe versus Wade at the federal level. That is something that can be done with a motivated Congress. That is something I would fight for every day as an elected official. There are several steps we can take to ensure that various restrictions on federal funding that are imposed as part of the Hyde Amendment are overturned. We also need to use and support efforts at state levels for certain, where many of the states will be battling for their own states' policies. But federal legislation and federal offense on the assault on women's rights is still our most powerful way forward to ensure that we don't end up with a fragmented country where some people have better rights than others. I, as a citizen, as a candidate, and as an elected official, know that we all have personal platforms as well to use our voices, to use our pocketbooks and more to support the organizations that will ensure that while we battle this out, everyone still has access to safe abortions. Abortion is healthcare, and we need to stand up for the public health of our nation, the family health of our nation, and women's reproductive health.
But what can you do at the federal level that doesn't just get appealed to the Supreme Court and overturned 6-3?
Codifying Roe versus Wade is a step that will protect this piece of legislation and protect it from being overturned. New York State has done this. It has codified Roe versus Wade, and I'm proud to be a New Yorker for this reason. Taking this step at the national level is the next step to escalate this fight.
Let's talk about agriculture, huge industry in upstate New York, specifically sustainable agriculture. You've talked about how subsidies are awarded and that subsidies meant for small family farms tend to go to big factory farms. How do we change that system and make it more equitable?
I love to get wonky about the Farm Bill, which is one of the pieces of legislation I have been very focused on throughout my career working in the climate policy space. The Farm Bill is one of the largest pieces of legislation that we have. It is definitely a huge piece of legislation, and it is the primary point of, it is a primary policy that dictates what money is spent in subsidies. We need to, as you say, we need to redirect funding to the farmers and producers who need it the most, those who are struggling to get by with razor-thin margins rather than the largest producers who don't need the support as much. When we talk about sustainable agriculture, too much people think that this is going to require expensive investments to change production. Any conversation we have about that, I speak about what the federal government can do to support and cover the costs of that transition. This cost should not fall on our producers. It is a public good to address climate change. That is where our federal funding should be going, not to Monsanto and other huge producers that put profits over people and over the environment. There are a ton of exciting new innovations, many of them coming from this region specifically, in how we can increase our production outputs and decrease our unsustainable practices. These are things that we should not only be scaling in implementation, we need to be sharing. We need to put our agricultural sector on the front and the world stage to show all of the types of ways that we are innovating crop production, animal agriculture, and more, because we will be a large solution for feeding a growing planet in a sustainable way. It should be part of our local and green economy plan that I foresee for this district.
Now, for example, in Ithaca, there's a Green New Deal. How do you overcome the messaging apparatus on the right that says the Green New Deal is about banning cars and banning cows and banning everything? How do you get the message through of what it actually is and how it benefits people?
The Green New Deal is about bringing jobs. It's about lowering energy costs. It's about bringing federal funding into your communities. It's about training new workforce. All of these accusations that are made against it have much stronger counter arguments that are based in fact, that talk about bringing real resources into the community, talk about creating real jobs, and talk about sustaining our economic viability for the long haul. It's also indicative of a party that stands for nothing. We need to stand for something with a vision. And we need to elect leaders who have a vision for what it is that we can do as a country, but more importantly, as a region. I know that we should be investing in our green economy and that we should be the hub of green jobs with manufacturing jobs that produce renewable batteries and other key aspects of our green revolution, and that we need to be investing in agriculture. We also need to support our care economy, and I'd love to chat about that.
Feel free.
We have a great health infrastructure across this region, which produces some of our top line nurses and doctors and medical researchers. So many of them leave this area because there aren't enough jobs to keep them here. Same with our college graduates. We also have an aging population in this region, and we do not have the type of infrastructure for many of our seniors to move out of their homes and into facilities that can assist them as they age affordably. I believe in a care economy that provides training and support to people who help us age in place and age with dignity. This means we have trained caretakers who are able to do nursing and also assist in a number of domestic capacities. It means they will have living wages, workplace protections, fair pay, and it means we have a higher level of confidence and security in entrusting those we love the most to age more comfortably. It's going to be something that becomes more and more relevant as our senior population expands and explodes over the coming decades. This is an opportunity to create jobs that we cannot outsource that pay well.
The larger issue over almost all these other issues that we've talked about is money. Interests give millions and billions of dollars to politicians who then steer the laws to benefit them. How do we break that cycle and get justice for the little guy?
We speak and we act. We start at the local level. I'm here today representing a campaign that is made up of community and national believers in social justice and progressive reform. We don't accept corporate PAC money or special interest money from any fossil fuels. We are here as one campaign, but join with many other campaigns that follow this same mandate. It takes a village. We need to elect many of us to get a cohort, but change starts at the voting booth, and I encourage everybody to go out to the polls. Our new primary is now August 23rd. It will be a split primary. There will still be some elections on June 28th, but don't forget to come back from that summer break and start and get to the polls on August 23rd.
Let's talk about democracy in the ballot box. People who have watched me know my politics lean leftward, so my Republican friends, you'll probably want to tune out right about now. But the Republican Party has been working systematically for at least a couple of decades to suppress votes of likely Democrats, and now in recent years to take over the vote counting and reporting machinery. I mean, what is the likelihood that Donald Trump runs for president in 2024, loses, and winds up president anyway?
A marginal extreme wing of the Republican Party has commandeered our political system to the point that we are actually you are asking these questions. I want to take a moment and acknowledge that. This is not a question about a democracy. If we are worried about the integrity of our elections, this is a call to action for all of us to elect leaders who believe in the power of the ballot box, who will appoint judges who do not throw out civil liberties, human rights, and who uphold the interests of people and not corporations. The lines that I care about are the lines that our Supreme Court and our government are increasingly drawing between us and our civil liberties, whether they are reproductive rights and the access to safe and legal abortions as we face today, or whether they are access to voter registration, to the ballot, to the polls. These civil liberties are ones we have fought for and won, and we cannot let our next generation think that encoded civil liberties can be rolled back based on who is in office. It's incumbent on us as voters, as well as those who are candidates like myself, to make sure that our fellow Americans and our next generation know that that behavior of challenging our democratic underpinnings will not stand.
Let's talk about public safety and policing. Would you agree that the term defund the police was harmful to the discussion and goes a little bit too far? And if so, how do we craft a process that respects the difficult job law enforcement has to do and conveys to them that some of them need to change the way they do it?
Words matter, and the way we talk about issues is a way that has to evoke the nature of the work we entail. Public safety reform does not entail taking all money away from the critical work that law enforcement conducts. Really what it is infusing money to enhance the work that they can accommodate. I believe that we should be funding public safety. We need to be talking about what it takes for people to feel safe. And we need to think through the multiple ways people can feel threatened. Again, today is an example where many women have woken up feeling much less safe today than they did last night. One of my dear friends wrote me a message saying, "I will hug my daughters so tightly tonight." That's the kind of sentiment when people are worried about women. We need to invest in safety mechanisms that protect our health, our mental health, our physical health, in ways across the spectrum. We need to uphold our laws, not break them apart. And so these are all matters where we have lost the forest for the trees. A conversation about terminology has obscured the critical goal of making us all feel safer. That's the question I wake up to address every morning.
You talk about language and words mattering. We're at a point where left and right can barely even speak to each other anymore. Is there a way to fix that?
There's always a way to have a critical and difficult conversation. It may not always end the way you want it to, but we have to try. One of my high school friends entered onto the opposite side of one of the issues I care and cared most about. He went to Ithaca High School with me and ended up as a high-level counsel at the Environmental Protection Agency, charged with dismantling the Clean Power Plan, which was a landmark piece of legislation passed under President Obama to reduce pollution and emissions for frontline communities and across the country. We had a series of conversations, traveling to one another to speak in person, and it was a place and way of communicating that recognized the human common experience we both shared growing up in this region, going to the same high school, knowing the same people and friends, having been nerdy together. Starting there, we made each other cry. You can connect with people with whom you see in the world in opposite ways. And you can start to find ways to at least introduce to others and start to have a conversation that will advance little by little. There is no silver bullet, but you have to enter the arena and enter the race. What is it? Wayne Gretzky says, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Everybody who sits out is passing an opportunity to engage. But we have a goal also. As a candidate, I have a goal. I want to bring everybody along with me, and I will give everybody an opportunity to join and answer any questions that people have that are fair and focused on conversation and adult discussion. But we also can't lose sight of the goal for fear of leaving some who will not engage in productive action with us, because our democracy and our human rights are too important to compromise on. This is not a popularity contest. This is democracy.
You were at the recent rally against cryptocurrency mining in Albany. The governor signed a measure to, at least for now, halt that. What do you see as the harm in this cryptocurrency craze, if you want to call it that?
I was very proud to join the Seneca Lake Guardians and many of Seneca Falls and the Finger Lakes' own leaders in going to Albany to join this rally in support of a moratorium on fossil fueled proof of work cryptocurrency mines. In layman's terms, this bill was about ending dirty energy for crypto. And what this means is that a particular method for producing cryptocurrency, proof of work, is very energy intensive, and has been bringing old fossil fuel energy production companies back online and firing them up with fracked natural gas, which contributes way more pollution to the environment than most other economic activities. And it is not generating revenue that stays in our communities. It is polluting here and producing revenues elsewhere. That is not a sustainable economic engine of growth. That is an unsustainable, polluting engine for profits for others.
We've covered a lot of issues today. Are there any others that you'd like to bring up before we close?
I'm really grateful to be here. And today is a critical moment for me as a candidate. I got into this race knowing that the stakes were so high for our environment and our climate, for our working families, and for women's reproductive rights and our civil liberties overall. Today, we can have known and anticipated that Roe versus Wade might be about to be overturned. But the news that the Supreme Court is poised to overturn it is still a gut punch. I sit here today fired up, ready to take on the fight to defend women and people across the country in search of affordable health care. Abortion is health care. Mental health services are health care. And access to a doctor for any need. This is healthcare. This is what our country is about. It's a big day to recommit ourselves to looking out for each other and ensuring that what we're doing is about using the resources this country has to reinvest in our people, not about ensuring that our people are pawns for generating more resources for just a few. And I'm proud to make that a core mission of my campaign.
Vanessa, thank you for your first time. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Happy to have you here. Vanessa Fajans-Turner, candidate for Congress in the 22nd Congressional District. Again, if you haven't heard, the primary is now in August. And any of the other candidates in the race are certainly welcome to contact us and appear before these cameras. Nate Sharman's been our producer today. Next week, we have our friends from Seneca County Cooperative Extension here. Next Tuesday morning at 9. We'll talk to you then.